So I thought, Jack and I were talking the other day. We've all talked a lot about meditation in the past. And, one of my first things was to ask, starting with you, Dad, or Harvey, was to say, what interested you? How did you first get introduced to meditation? I remember even as a kid growing up, you always meditated.
You do?
I do. And, I'll talk about some of my memories of that as a kid.
Right.
But, for you, what was it? Who was it that introduced you to it?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think looking back, and that's many, many years now, back to when I was meditating, back to the early 1960s, I think, and I was married in 63, early 1960s. But I think it was transcendental meditation became for the first time, meditation was brought to the United States in this particular form with mantras by a particular fellow, I forget his name. Maharishi. Yeah, Maharishi. And he brought transcendental meditation to the United States, and they used a mantra. And I remember it must have been, to have been interested, and I knew it could reduce stress. It could be very relaxing. And I think I must have been, I don't know what kind of stress it is, whatever it was, I was attracted that I would like to try it. And I remember there was a little house in Pleasantville, not too far from Ossining. There was a little house, and that's where they had their sessions. And you would go to this house, and they would provide you with a mantra. Now, a mantra meant that it was a type, I would call it almost gibberish, but it was a saying. It was a particular saying that was unique to you. It was your mantra. Okay. And if you said this particular mantra and you combined it with the breath, then this would induce a state of transcendental meditation. And I can remember getting started with this. And I still remember my Aunt Marilyn and Bonnie came to visit. And I had just come back from this house, and I told them what I had done, and I was really enthused about it. And
so this was when you were living in Westchester?
Yes, I was living in Westchester for the first time.
Right.
And then at that time, so
you were already a physician at that point.
Oh, yeah, I was already in practice.
So this was like you were in practice.
Oh, much later. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So it wasn't as a younger person
I must have been in my either 30s or early 40s. Yeah. At that time, 30s or early 40s. And at that time, there was a researcher at Harvard by the name of Herbert Benson. Does that name ring?
Not for me.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Well, this is a fascinating story.
All right.
Can I take it?
Yeah,
So we can cut some of this out.
No, tell the story.
It's a fascinating
story. That's the idea here, long story.
Because Herbert Benson was a well-known researcher, and he was at Harvard, and his main interest was hypertension, and he worked in hypertension. And at that time, a group of meditators who did transcendental meditation came to him and said, "We would like you to study us." And of course he was in a lab, but he couldn't, he was at Harvard, but he didn't know how he was going to work that out with his research and everything. Right. He didn't think Harvard would be very amenable to doing that kind of research there in their laboratory. But somehow he did some. He got them to come in, and he hooked them up, to all his blood pressure readings and everything, pulse, blood pressure, respirations. And he had them do their transcendental meditation. And he was shocked.
It was the first biofeedback studies.
He was really shocked. He was shocked by it was sort of the opposite of stress. Because in stress you have a rapid heart rate, rapid respirations, and your brain waves are at a certain type of brain wave. And he saw that these meditators who did transcendental meditation could induce an opposite state where their respiration slowed down, their pulse went down, their respiration slowed down, their blood pressure slowed down. And he was really impressed with that. But later, that was the beginning. But later, he found out that you didn't really have to have a mantra to get the same effect. That if he took somebody who wasn't even experienced, who had no experience in meditation, and he had them do two things. Number one, say either a word or a phrase, something in repetition, so there'd be a repetition of something, combining it with returning to the breath if your mind wanders. Because we know when you meditate, all of us, our mind wanders. We go into the future, we go into the past. They call it the monkey mind.
Right.
So he found that even inexperienced meditators, if they used this particular method, they could induce the same physiological state.
Not using just the transcendental mantra version, but
Exactly.
other methods.
And he actually came up with the term. He was the one who originated the term relaxation response. The relaxation response was the opposite
of the stress response.
reaction.
Right.
And this is how it got started.
That's interesting.
And then from there, he really had to drop his studies at Harvard with hypertension, etc., and he really got into studying meditation. He wound up in India. He wound up working with the Dalai Lama, and he wound up working with monks.
So Benson, this is Benson.
Herbert Benson. He brought whole teams with him to India
Wow.
to study.
So he's
meditation.
one of your mentors
He
as
was
far
one,
as one of
he
the
was a
people
major
who
mentor.
Yeah.
So he had a book. The first book was called The Relaxation Response.
I remember that book.
Right. Relaxation
'Cause I
Response.
remember you showing it to me. Yeah.
And then he had another book, a later, I forget the one in between. A later book was called The Maximum Mind, that you would meditate first and then you would think about an issue after you relaxed yourself. That was called The Maximum Mind.
Interesting.
But he was the one that really, and he also detected at that time, when he went to India, he was shocked because there was a group of experienced monks who could meditate on top of a mountain that was very, very cold. Outside, where if you sat there, you would freeze. They actually could sweat. They actually could wet the sheets on their back, primarily through meditation.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that was the beginning.
That was
he was a mentor. That was the beginning.
Yeah,
but can I just say one thing? Then I'm going to stop talking.
No, keep going. You don't have to stop.
But I just want to say that. Oh, I loved him, and I tried to. I did. I tried to do the relaxation response and all that, but it's very hard. I was not consistent, and I might have been conscientious initially in following that, but over the years, I would say, faded.
Yeah.
Slipped. I would do some. I believed in it. I really believed in it. And I attended some lectures. I even heard him talk a couple of times. I remember Mom and I went to a session in New York City that was sponsored by one of the meditation, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. But I couldn't get into and if you extend, if you took his method and you extended it out, he would want you to do like 10 or 20 minutes twice a day.
Right. That was the transcendental technique.
That was his
Rishi.
technique, the relaxation. He would take his technique, but using Herbert Benson, just a saying. And that saying could be poetic, it could be religious, it could be anything. You could make up your own.
Yeah.
But it was something, he would have you say it on expiration. As it turned out, it doesn't make any difference. It could be on inspiration, it could be on expiration, it can be on both. But that was his method.
Right.
But I wasn't, yet I knew it was valuable. I never laughed it off. I always knew from his research studies, etc., that it was valuable.
Interesting.
And yet to apply it, to be consistent, I found not easy.
Right.
I found difficult.
That's interesting. And I think, from the standpoint of how we get introduced to things, you were introduced at a little bit of a later time. You'd already been through your graduate degree. You were working, you had family,
right.
At that point. And in Jack's situation, it's a little bit different because, you were introduced at a younger age. And I'll just before, in terms of that, I think it's funny because when I was just going over sort of the pre-interview thoughts for myself, my experiences with both of you, because I'm kind of in the middle, was I remember when Jack was young and you would sometimes be a little have trouble sleeping, for instance. And we would do the body scan.
Yeah, that's right. We did.
And body scan was a form of meditation.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was interesting. But from your standpoint, in your experience and how you incorporate it into your life, what was your introduction to meditation, Jack?
Yeah, I was going to start with the body scan also.
Go
so
ahead.
I forget what age this would have been, but it would have been probably, between ages 10 and 13,
Yeah,
around
definitely.
there.
It was preteen.
I think there was a time where as a kid I would have some trouble sleeping, and I remember Harvey showing me the technique of the body scan, which what it is, if you're laying in bed, you go through each, from top to bottom, each part of your body, each limb, and you direct your attention at it in succession. So, you'd start with your head. You'd feel the sensations of your head. You'd feel the sensations of your face, your eyes, your nose, and go down, your chest, down to your legs and feet. And that really was my first introduction to mindfulness. I think that was a form of mindfulness.
It was.
I mean, you're paying attention to the sensations of the body, which is a huge part of our conscious experience all the time. It's just the sensations of our body. So yeah, that was definitely the first. I didn't know it at the time that was mindfulness by name.
Right.
But in terms of, then fast forward, I'm 22 now, and only as of 2 years ago is when I started formally practicing mindfulness every day.
What made you decide that you were going to incorporate this into your daily habits, or what was it? Was there something you were trying to manage? Were you feeling stress or anxiety, or were you just hey, I want to be more aware? I mean, what was the driving force between deciding to incorporate that? That's a big thing. It's like joining a gym. It's dedicating a lot of time to a technique or some practice.
I think part of it was maybe it might have been partly wanting to mitigate any future stress and anxiety, because the truth is I've never been a super anxious or stressful person.
I definitely see that.
I didn't have really those problems I desperately needed to fix.
Yeah.
But on top of Grandpa Harvey, his interest in mindfulness, also a big intellectual hero of mine is Sam Harris,
right,
who has written a lot about neuroscience and religion. And more recently, he's written about mindfulness, and he's actually quite the expert in mindfulness. We were talking about earlier, he spent almost his entire 20s on various silent meditation retreats in Asia. I think countries like India and Nepal are around there, with some real mindfulness masters and experts, and learning from them in a couple different branches of meditation that we can get into some of the different branches later. But he created an app called Waking Up, which is, in my opinion, is probably one of the best mindfulness apps out there. Another one, I think the one you used is 10% Happier.
10% Happier.
Which was done by Dan Harris, no relation to Sam Harris.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. And Dan Harris, by the way, in that app, a lot of that, not all the app, it's a very big app now. It's become very big. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is spent with this fellow by the name of Joseph Goldstein. Mm-hmm. And just in brief, then you go on. Yeah. But Joseph Goldstein, who he's probably in his early 70s now, but he was in the Peace Corps, where he started to learn meditation in the Far East, and he became very, very interested in meditation. He is the main person who brought mindfulness from the East to the West. Yeah, and in fact, if you look at all your major meditators in this country, including John Kabat-Zinn would be very famous, your particular family, they all, including Sam Harris, their mentor was Joseph Goldstein.
Interesting.
Joseph Goldstein has been on Sam Harris's podcast 3 times. I don't think there's any other guest who's been on that often, because I'm a big fan of that podcast.
That's interesting.
But anyway, I started doing his app, Waking Up. And
so this was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, it would have been Well, it would have been February of 2019. So a year and a half. Year and a half. So, that app has a 50-day introductory course, 5 to 10 minutes a day. And then after that, it goes on to daily meditations, which is like a formal session you can do every day. It's a new 10-minute guided meditation.
Right.
On top of that, it has lessons that talks about some of the philosophies of meditation and kind of the intersection of science and mindfulness. And then,
So that app though is a guided meditation. It's
Yep, it's Sam guiding you for 10 minutes on essentially how to meditate.
And then in that, or is it expected that you would do 10 minutes once a day, or how's it set up?
It's once a day is assumed.
Once a day.
Yep.
Wow.
And the lessons are really good on there. And so then that was when I really started learning a ton of the philosophy of mindfulness that I never knew before. And not just the philosophy of mindfulness, facts about consciousness, about our own minds that I have never thought about before and that I consider extremely profound and would love if other people, I feel like it's something that other people would actually enjoy learning about and make their lives more just closer to the present moment. And it would, on top of lowering stress and anxiety.
So I guess
which
that
are like
gets us
added,
to,
those are just added benefits.
I mean, that's
it's like side benefits.
I mean, you're bringing up the key thing, and I think it's worth discussing. Like, what are really, what are the real benefits that we think or that we know from studies that are, the result of regular meditation? What should people be looking for if we join a gym and we change our diet? Our goal is to develop healthy fitness and be physically fit. What are the goals of meditation in terms of our mental health?
Right. Before we get into that, though, if you don't mind, because there's one, because we'll talk about the history first, and I just we don't want to leave out, and you're familiar with our fellow Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh yeah, we love Thich Nhat Hanh.
But I just want to mention the name of Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah,
because Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, who was a Buddhist, who was a Buddhist monk at the time of the Vietnam War.
He's Vietnamese, wasn't he? Yeah, Vietnamese.
And played a role in wanting peace very, very badly. I think his brother was killed in the war as well. But Thich Nhat Hanh was a major. I said Joseph Goldstein was a major player in bringing mindfulness from the east to the west. But Thich Nhat Hanh was just as much a major player, if not even more so, in his writings. Because Thich Nhat Hanh became very, very popular in the United States. And his writings, as you know, Craig, I remember being on a canoe trip and going to a store, and I saw the first video I saw of Thich Nhat Hanh. That's how I got into him. And I remember him, I was excited about him.
Well, he did retreats in Vermont.
Yes, and I remember him showing him to you. You were in the hospital one time, and I gave you Thich Nhat Hanh. But the point is with his books, all his books were on mindfulness.
I remember, actually, I have a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is his poems. And one of the poems was about his brother when his brother died and the deep sorrow he had. But what he talked about in this poem about the loss of his brother was him walking through these flowers on his way to his brother's grave and his experience with the flowers. And no matter what he did, whether he was grieving, talking about anything, he always incorporated his present experience with that, and that was his poetry.
That's amazing.
It was awesome. It's one of the most amazing poems I've ever read. Deeply sad but beautiful. It told of his sadness. He's amazing. He is amazing. I'm glad we went back. I think there's a lot.
But now let's go forward. But I had to go back and just mention him because he was
for sure.
Such a major player.
Oh yeah,
major.
Right. And I think we can. This doesn't have to be chronological. The other thing is just
true.
These things will come out further. Even going back to our own experiences, because even in med school for me, I remember when I went to med school, I worked hard and I felt good. I wasn't anxious. But I had a group of friends, remember Asa Lefkowitz and some of my Orthodox Jewish friends, and they were rapping tefillin. So these guys were hardcore religious. And they would always try to, get me to join them. And
they were what? Rapping?
It's called rapping tefillin. It's a meditative religious practice.
I thought you meant they were like rapping.
No, it wasn't rapping. No. That's your generation. But for the Jews out there, they know. For the non-Jews, rapping tefillin are these two small wooden – there's two small wooden there's scrolls inside. And they're wrapped in leather. And it's this process of praying and connecting your mind and your body, because one goes on the top of your head as you're saying certain prayers. The other one connects to your bicep and wraps around your arm. Remember? You've wrapped a thing before.
Yes, I have.
And after your bar mitzvah, you learn how to do this. And I would do it with them, and it was very meditative. I remember I wasn't religious about it, but I would go with them, and I did this for quite a while with them.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I knew you did it, but I didn't know how for quite a while.
Well, that was what it was. And I do remember that it was very meditative experience. And I laugh because my one friend, Asa Lefkowitz, who is he was the top of our class, brilliant. He would like cross-reference our textbooks. If there was a question in a test that was a little off, he would be able to cross-reference to the professor and be like, look, that question, look, in this book they mentioned this, and that's why I gave that answer. I mean, he was so sharp. And I believe he was very present when you spoke with him. Anything you did with this guy, it was a very, very interesting experience. He was super guy, very bright. But I think some of that is that religion, I think, has some very meditative
it does.
Aspects
and in fact,
to it.
prayer, and Benson mentioned that too, prayer was a prime method of inducing the relaxation response.
Which I think is very funny, because then when you look at Sam, the question is, Sam Harris, who's an atheist, like a touted atheist, has kind of captured like people. It seems like even with Buddhism is a religion, obviously.
Well, no, Buddhism isn't exactly a religion. It's more of a philosophy.
It's both. Right? It's really both.
It's kind of both. I mean, it stems from.
It has religious aspects.
It has its roots in Hinduism, right? I mean, from India, which is a religion. They have elephant gods.
Yeah, Hinduism
and whatnot. You can be a Buddhist without really adhering to any religious dogmas.
That's the question. Yeah. And so one of the questions is there a way that we can incorporate meditation? That's what I did with the tefillin, because I went through this process which was very meditative, even though to some people it had very religious meaning. To me, it wasn't really religious. Right. It was taking the time each day to say, brain connect to bicep, connect to body, be present.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Well,
and so
this is what Sam Harris defines as spirituality. He actually likes to use the word spirituality in a kind of different definition than is used a lot of the time today, which is just the kind of interesting, you can call them like mystical experiences that people have either when they're in, a meditative state. People have very similar experiences when they're on psychedelic drugs that like psychedelic drugs. I've never done, psychedelic drugs, but from listening to people who have, they induce states that they would consider, very similar to like religious experiences or mystical experiences. And what Sam Harris was trying to do with his book, Waking Up, the subtitle of it is, essentially a guide to spirituality without religion, is that a lot of these Buddhist philosophies that have to do with mindfulness are totally exportable to the West and anywhere else without the religion part attached to it. Because they are just, it might actually help to define what mindfulness is.
And that is why, and by the way, Craig, that is why that is the main reason why the American Psychological Association was able to incorporate many of the principles of Buddhist psychology into their programs. In psychotherapy. Why? Because there was no religious aspect to it. It was really taking their knowledge of the human mind and their psychology and applying it. And what our research was showing is that what Buddhism learned over thousands of years, they could start to prove in the laboratory.
Interesting.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like more. It almost has more scientific footing than mainstream, pseudosciences that are considered science that by some people are considered good medicine in the West, like acupuncture and even chiropractic is on very good standing in the West. If you ask a lot of people, they'll say, not to badmouth the whole field here, but if you Wikipedia chiropractic or acupuncture, they're both pseudosciences with not much academic studies to back them up. Mindfulness is now having academic studies to back it up. It started out in the East; they weren't doing studies on it, but it turns out there are a lot of benefits to it. I'd love to just if someone's listening who doesn't know what mindfulness is, we're just talking about it.
That's right.
And no one knows.
Right. We've been, Jack and I have had we have a lot of discussions.
I love it. So
I think we ought to
first
talk
of all,
a little bit about mindfulness.
Meditation is a very big branch, right? Which has many sub branches. Which has many. There are many branches of meditation that are very different from each other, and mindfulness, which is also known as Vipassana in the original, is it Pali? I think that's the language, the Indian language. Vipassana or mindfulness is just one type.
Yeah, but mindfulness, if we want a little different, but mindfulness, in my understanding, is not, and I was confused about that too, how, if you define meditation and you define mindfulness.
It's much more than meditation. Yeah.
Right. Mindfulness, in the meditation that we use, he used the word vipassana, which is a type of meditation called insight meditation. Right. Where you sort of focus in on a particular object, and then from there you may investigate things. And if you investigate things, you become more insightful. But to do that, and that is, I don't want to get confused. The point I wanted to make.
Insight meditation versus...
Well, meditation, mindfulness is the center of meditation because it is, number one, it's the pathway. It's the goal. It's the way that you meditate is by being mindful. In Vipassana meditation, you use mindfulness. The tool of mindfulness is the way that you meditate.
Okay.
It's not meditation.
Right.
It's the tool by which you meditate.
Right.
That's it. The other thing is the goal of meditation is really, not to you may not be, but the final thing that happens if you meditate, you become more mindful over time. If you can meditate over time, you will become more mindful.
Right.
I want to be... I want to be as broad as possible, almost. Like, mindfulness is really just paying attention to the present moment.
Right.
I mean, it is just as simple as, paying attention to what's arising in consciousness in your mind.
That's right.
That's really all it is. It's extremely simple.
Right. It's very simple. And I'd like to give you one simple definition. I'm going to read it because it's very simple.
Let's hear it.
It is simple, but it's a very good definition. It's a very good definition. Okay. It's paying attention. It is paying attention. At the moment, what's here? Oh, my hearing aid. It's paying attention moment by moment to exactly what you are experiencing right now, but separating out your reactions from the raw sensory events. There is no judgment involved. And that is the critical part of what they call bare attention.
Yeah.
That is the very essence, the very beginning of mindfulness is bare attention. And there's no judgment. It's
Right.
just being aware of everything that's outside of you, what's going on within you. It's just paying attention.
Yeah.
It's observing.
But
we're not judging. There's no judgment.
Right, there's
involved.
no judgment.
That's important.
But before we get into that, even the understanding of mindfulness, like one thing I think for people who are listening who aren't aware, people are living their lives. They're going to work. They're taking care of their families. They go home. They go to bed. They do things that they think are healthy for them. Like what are they? What should they be thinking? Why should they get the Sam Harris app? Why should they take 10 minutes out of their busy day to practice mindfulness? We're getting into this, but what is it? How do we get it out to other people that if you do this practice, you're going to have these benefits in terms of your interactions with people. You're going to benefit. What I want to understand and what I'd like people who are listening to this to hear from you is, what do we think? Why should people do this? Before we get into the actual mechanism of how you do it in the mindfulness, why should people take the time? I'm busy. I'm going to work. I'm home at 6. I'm exhausted. Or I get up early as it is. Why is it important for me to take 10 minutes of my day to practice this mindfulness? Yeah. What's that gonna do for them?
Well, I think I think, and I can talk first, the most common reason in our country, in the West, the most common reason why meditation and mindfulness is really pushed, the most common reason, is that it, just as we said with Herbert Benson when he studied the effects on the body, it's anti-stress. It's relaxing. It's really relaxing the mind and the body. You're going from high gear into a more neutral gear, frame of mind. Mm-hmm. So it's very relaxing. And that 10 minutes or 20 minutes, once or twice a day, can start to spread out during the day. So the effect of once or twice a day starts to spread out.
But then if you have
But
somebody...
that's the prime reason people
The reason
meditate.
one is it's good for you. That's reason one.
Is what?
Is that it's good for you. Reason one, right? That's not my favorite reason, but...
But one of my other thoughts is like...
I'm not saying it's the only reason.
For instance,
most common.
People aren't looking to become a different person. We're not telling people to meditate because it's going to change who you are.
Well,
it doesn't.
It does change.
No, that's the point. See, that's
does.
the point.
Why you think people become a new person if they meditate?
Well, actually, this is an interesting topic.
Now we're going to get into right.
We see. Here's one of my questions, and this is what it comes down to. Like, or does it give them?
Yes, you will become a better person. That is why you should do it.
Better,
ideally.
You may not become a better person. You think that if somebody meditates, they could become a better person.
No,
they'll become a better version of themselves.
Well, not just meditation. I mean, we're also talking about a very specific, the tenets of mindfulness and the findings of a lot of Buddhists. Mm-hmm. I'll just answer the question about why should people like that meditate?
Right. Why should people meditate?
Because, first of all, it makes you less reactionary in the world. A lot of people, their minds can get hijacked by bad things that happen to them during the day. My favorite example is getting cut off in traffic. I feel like for a lot of people that can like poison your mind for maybe an hour or more, depending on like what someone does in traffic. And that is just not useful. It's probably the opposite of useful because it just makes you angry, which, I mean, look, I'm not the medical person, but I think it can like raise your stress. The tools of mindfulness allow you to observe what's happening in the present moment in a less reactionary way. I think that's fair to say.
It's less reactionary, and I think it's also a much more fully engaged way. So
you're identified with what's actually happening, you know. So that's one thing. You become less reactionary. There is another benefit which has to do with your relationships with other people and improving those relationships, wishing people well consciously. There are some practices we can talk about where you consciously wish people well.
Right. Loving kindness.
Yeah.
But I think that's a very good point. But go ahead, Harvey.
One thing I wanted to say though, you can get confused a little bit by confusing why should you meditate, why should you be more mindful. They're not really the same thing.
Right, that's a good point.
Mindfulness is a tool to meditate, but you can be mindful without meditating all day in 10 or 15 minutes. You can be mindful during the course of your day, which would include some meditation. It gets hard to explain, but the mindfulness itself is meditative. But let me explain, though. The thing I want to explain is that there are layers of mindfulness. We're talking only about the first layer.
Okay.
And the first layer,
which I think is the easiest to talk about.
The easiest to talk about, bare attention. You're
right.
just aware of everything going on around you. You're not judging anything, okay?
Right.
And in fact, one of the real values of that,
mm-hmm.
one of the real values in the course of your day,
mm-hmm.
one of the real values is that if you have a stress, you don't react right away. Normally, if something happens, you react. And you react may be not very beneficial to you or to the other person. But if you can have some space
mm-hmm.
between what happens and your reaction, that space is mindfulness.
Mm.
And that space may really help you a lot in your day. But we get into mindfulness, we get to the next layer. What's the next layer of mindfulness? The next layer of mindfulness is observation. You are observing your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
This is not meditation.
It's metacognition. That's my favorite.
You are
word.
observing.
I don't actually know if that's a good way of putting it.
Well, it's thinking about thinking.
We'll forget the term meditation, but it's observing your thoughts. It's being aware of what's going on in your mind.
Okay.
Just
being aware of it.
At its highest level, it includes what you would call, or what Joseph Goldstein would call, the filters of the mind. And in fact, he asked people. In fact, Joseph Goldstein would say we should really ask ourselves throughout the day, what is the attitude of our mind?
Now, wait, did you say observing before, or did you mean like investigating, maybe?
Yeah, investigating.
Because the first step would be observing.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And you said the second step would be, you said,
the
would be
first step was
investigating,
aware,
right?
was...
the very first step is just being aware.
Being aware.
To
me,
as you go
I was
up,
a little confused.
But as you go up, as you climb the ladder of mindfulness, now you're getting more into, you're aware,
mm-hmm.
but that awareness is observation. You may be aware of your environment, but now you start to become a little more aware of your internal, of your thoughts, of your mind. When you carry that to a highest level, you now become aware, and this takes time. This is not immediate. This is not something that people would do right away.
Mm-hmm.
But you start to become aware, and I can give you a perfect example we spoke about, of the filters of your mind.
Mm.
For example, there are certain... the mind, there are many aspects. There are what the Buddhists call the poisons of the mind. Anger, greed. The other one is misperception, or not. It's misperceiving things. But anger, greed, those things that can poison the mind, as opposed to positive things like love, compassion, etc. But if you become aware of what's going on in your mind, that can influence. It can influence what you're mindful of. If you're very angry, if you're very upset, how you see something may be very different than someone who's aware that he's been angry and upset and tries to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tries to resolve that.
That's
a higher level. So mindfulness can start with at the bare attention, but at its highest level, it starts to investigate yourself. That's the term you were looking for. It's observation, but you are investigating your you're investigating yourself, how you react to things, you as a person, how you react.
So it seems almost like if you're investigating, then you're kind of leaving the present moment. Or are you not leaving the present moment when you're at those next levels of meditation?
You are. Because when you're investigating now, that's right. That's a good, what did you say? You're not, that's right.
You're leaving the present moment because
right.
a lot of times, so many of these techniques are let those thoughts go.
Right.
You know, don't let your mind focus onto, you know, a fleeting thought. Just let it release it.
That's right.
But tell us more about this investigative part of it. That's interesting.
Yes. No. Well, I'll give you the.
Or give us an example.
I'll give you an example.
Give us an example.
I gave one to Jack, which he really liked, which I detected in myself. And you can cut some of this out.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But the example was...
As long as it's not about masturbation, we're good.
No, that's right. That's right. This is about within the past 2 years, I had bought a particular stock. And the stock was, I think it was a Boeing stock. And that stock did very, very well. And we had a trip. We had a trip to England. We had a trip before that to California to see my sister, whose husband was sick. And so I cashed in on the stock. But I made a bad error that I felt was an error. Instead of just selling part of the stock, I sold the whole stock. Because it did so well, I just sold the whole stock. And then, after that, the stock took off like a bullet. And it not only maybe doubled, but maybe 5 times. I mean, really.
Right. Shot.
And of course, now it's having problems with...
But you sold it because you made something.
Oh, yes, it was legit. I sold it. But I was mad at myself. There was anger there. But the thing I want to get at, that thought of selling the stock the way I did and not being smart enough to sell just part of it and hold on to the rest, because I still was making a profit, that thought bothered me. And it would come to me, not when it would come to me at any time. And it really, and then it would bother me. And I was angry with myself, etc. And I had to say to myself eventually, I got to investigate this. Why? Because I know this was a recurrent thought. It was not just a thought happening.
Right.
It was a recurrent thought.
Right. Interesting.
And now that it was recurrent, I had to kind of deal with it.
Right. That's interesting.
Was going on within me that made me feel this way. And I said to myself at that point, was there some poison in my mind? What was the poison in my mind that this was disturbing me so much? And I thought of the main poisons. The main poisons, number one, would be anger. And I was angry with myself.
Did you do this using meditation?
Yes. Well, not so much as using meditation. It was done at a time when, not necessarily.
So was meditation or mindfulness
I was using,
a part?
Yeah, mindfulness was a part of it, with mindful breathing.
Right.
Right. And then thinking about the issue.
And then investigating
the issue. Why was it bothering me so much? No question anger was playing a role, and that I understood. But there's another thing that came to my mind that I had never thought of before as I investigated myself, because this issue did bother me. I lost a lot of money in this deal. And the thing that came to my mind...
Well, you didn't lose money because you never actually had the money.
Right. But craving.
You could have had more money,
but
theoretically.
The poison that came to my mind is the poison that I had to deal with.
Greed.
I was being greedy. Greed. I had
Right.
never thought of that before. But it came to my mind. I was really being greedy. Once I accepted that I was being greedy, the whole thing, I wouldn't say it completely went away.
Yeah.
But the whole thing lost its power.
It faded.
The thought, that painful thought
Yeah.
of being stupid and all that,
Yeah.
it all...
Because you associated it with a negative goal, that greed. Once you said that feeling is because of greed, I don't want to be greedy. You realize the positive part of you didn't allow it to have the power over you.
It didn't allow it to have the power over it. And I'm giving that as an example of if something is bothering you, and everybody has issues that are bothering them, if you can take the time to look at those issues, maybe in a more relaxed state when your mind is quieter. So meditation can help that in being quieter. But the investigation, you're right, when you said the investigation is not bare attention. The investigation goes beyond mindfulness. The investigation, they have a term for it in Buddhism. They call it the wisdom factor. Mm-hmm. And the wisdom factor is an investigative reporter. Mm-hmm. It's investigating yourself. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to give that example. Mm-hmm. That's an example.
And I'd love to point out that in like a year and a half of formally meditating daily and trying to be mindful all the time, I only just learned about this investigative side of mindfulness recently. And for over a year, I feel like there are profound discoveries to be made about the mind only with the awareness part. Which is, and there's two parts of that. There's formal, we can, if you're spending 10 minutes a day formally meditating, yes, you can be sitting cross-legged on a chair, like what most people think of as meditating. And following like a guided mindfulness meditation, because it's not trivial. Like I want to say people should probably look for like these types of apps that we mentioned earlier, because it's totally possible to be thinking you're meditating and doing it in a way that's not getting you anywhere. I mean, a lot of people will sit down cross-legged, and if I walked into the room and looked at them, I'd be like, it looks like they're meditating, but they might just be thinking. Right. And meditating is not sitting quietly and thinking.
Well, one of the questions,
or at least mindfulness,
you're bringing up a good point, like this term of, can people, does everybody have to start with guided meditation? I mean, if you look and you read a book like Thich Nhat Hanh's Keys to Meditation, his Key Steps, that book on Zen Keys.
I remember that book.
So Zen Keys has segments on like wash the dishes to wash the dishes.
Right.
It has all these chapters, and it just teaches you these lessons on how do we learn to do things for the sake of doing them, and understand the deep interrelatedness that these things do. I'm washing this bowl, but so many people are going to eat from this bowl, and I'm cleaning it for all the people who will eat for it. Or, there's this interrelatedness. It gives you a connection to other people. The awareness part of it, when you're really aware, like here we are at this table and I have a Dell computer here, and think of all the people who work at Dell that were connected to the creation of this computer and this table from Staples, and and you realize I am not alone. There is some super interconnectedness happening right here, right now.
I think that ties into gratitude, which is a good thing to practice. Ultimately, I want to go back. I think we forgot like a very simple reason why mindfulness is great to practice, because it is a tool that can help you become content in the present moment. Ideally in any present moment. In any moment, it's about being content right now. It doesn't matter if we have all these problems that we have to solve in the future, or these mistakes we made in the past. Both of those things can really hijack your mind into being anxious and stressful and sad right now. And mindfulness can give you the tool to not necessarily get rid of those things, but for your mind not to be hijacked by them. And to, Sam Harris would say, like, recognize that consciousness is totally free right now. Like right now we are totally free to just to observe our minds and be content.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Not suffer unnecessarily. Right. I think that's a big part of mindfulness is not to suffer unnecessarily.
That's funny too. I think you're bringing up another good point when you said not to hijack your mind, because I know for me, and I'm not a regular meditator, so that's not something I do regularly, but there were times that I did it where I would just practice like breathing, and I read the Zen Keys book and Thich Nhat Hanh, and especially in medical school when I was feeling stressed with certain things and I knew I needed to relax myself. Of course, the 2 pots of coffee that I drank the night before studying didn't help. They kind of dial you up, and then you meditate to try to dial down. But I think even now, something that I do, like for instance, in the hospital, if I get called to a code as a physician and you're running a code, it's, there's a code 99, somebody's dead or dying, and you have to go there, and there's all these algorithms, and as you're going to either the emergency room or wherever you're going, your mind can get hijacked. Because you can be thinking your mind can jump ahead of you 2 floors to what do I need to remember? What's this person going? What's happening?
That's a very good point.
And so I know for a fact, anytime I get called to something acute, 100% something I practice.
You do what?
I completely ground myself and become 100% aware of where I am right now.
Oh.
I'm going down the stairs.
Right.
My hand is on the banner.
You told me that when I had to give a lecture.
The banner, the banister, going down the staircase is cold. It's metal. Oh, look at that picture. And I get myself completely present. And if it takes me 2 minutes to get to the emergency room, that 2 minutes of 100% making myself fully aware shuts my brain off from being hijacked about what's happening. It's like a forced awareness. And by the time I get to the emergency room and I'm talking to the team and we're going through things, you feel like everybody's in slow motion. I know that because I've experienced this multiple times.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I absolutely agree. And I even now I have learned, I've started to apply mindfulness to the clinic situation. When I work in the clinic and I have to go see a difficult patient or something like that, is to just practice take a little moment to practice a little mindful breathing before going into the room. And it can make a big...
I also did
make
that.
A huge
I also
difference.
did that before I did kidney biopsies. Anytime I had to do something or a procedure, I always made sure that I was completely present. And I do it when I see new patients also. You try to get yourself, because you can have so many things going on, and you know this as a physician. You can have one call that's something, and then you go into a room, and that call could have hijacked your mind. But somehow you have to become present because the next person needs 100% of your analysis.
That's right.
Not the 20% that's left over from the 80% that went over on that phone call. So
those are perfect stories.
Those are very good points. Those are excellent points.
There's something I wanted to mention that ties directly into that fact of you talking about, observing your mind in those stressful moments, which is all we have is our minds. Throughout our entire life, literally all you have is your mind to interact, with the world and to,
Good point, Jack.
So mindfulness is like exercising for your mind. People, because it's a new field, it's because it's a somewhat new phenomenon for the West, at least, for a lot of people. It's not as well studied as exercise is. And, today, no one questions that physical exercise is good for your body, right? It's common knowledge. I think sometime in the future, it'll be likely that people eventually will think of some sort of meditation or mindfulness as exercising for. It's as obviously good for you. It's as obviously good for your mind as exercising is good for your body.
Right? It's like exercising a muscle that you've never worked out before, and it takes practice. If you don't practice mindfulness and meditation, you can't do it when you need it.
That's very true.
Right.
It's it's taken. I feel like I've been. This is not to discourage people. Just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy.
That's
because I've been doing it for a year and a half now, and I still, there are a lot of times where I forget to be mindful, or where I'll go, and it's not that I've done it daily for that time. Like there are many days where I just forget to do it, or I just I'm too lazy or whatever.
But I think one of the other things that you're bringing up, a very good point, is not to get caught up in the destination of I'm going to be nirvana. I'm going to be some
That's actually something.
It's about the journey
That's a really good
of
point.
doing it.
So there are a couple different ways people might start approaching mindfulness. But one of the ways, which is one of the most common, and the way I think both of us probably started, is just the technique of paying attention to the breath, which is a tool. It's a practice in concentration, a practice in attention.
Right.
And it sort of is a prerequisite to full mindfulness. Yes, if you can't pay attention to your breath, it's going to be hard to be mindful all the time.
And it doesn't even have to be the breath. Holding on to the banister, like you said, your position of your hands on the banister is also grounding. It's just that the breath is very available to us. It's with us all the time.
Yeah, and
so
it's something we can control.
We can control, we can do. But what you were talking about, holding on to the banister,
that ties into free will. We can talk about later.
That's just as grounding. It's just as grounding as your breath. If I can say one thing too, is that yes, I do some meditation. I try. But I guess where I've come over the past year or two, I'm 83 now, I'm going to be 84. As I get older, I've really tried to increase the amount, because I don't feel, I feel my wife is a very mindful person. She's aware of what's going on. I'm not always aware. I'll go into the future a lot. I'll go into the past a lot. A little too much sometimes. And not really be in the present moment. Right there. So I have really tried to, there's formal meditation, but there's also informal meditation that people can do. And I teach this to students, by the way. I have a sheet on mindful breathing. Because mindful breathing, if you do it for a minute, it's like a mini meditation. If you do it for 20 minutes, it's a more formal meditation.
Right.
But you can do mini meditations during your day, what Thich Nhat Hanh would call gathas. And a gatha is a saying. You can make up your own saying. It could be poetic. It could be anything you want. But it's a saying that makes your mindful breathing more acceptable to you. You accept it better. It's just easier to do. So I have some sayings from Thich Nhat Hanh. I have some of my own, and I use the mindful breathing during the day a lot now. I'm getting better at it. It takes practice. Why does it take practice? The hardest thing about mindful breathing is to remember to do it. To remember is the hardest part.
Yeah.
And
the only way to remember is to practice.
You've got to practice.
And
make it more of a habit.
And that is, I think, one of the points of this, and I think one of the things we want to bring to people who are listening is being mindful and getting the most out of everything that you do is, as Jack said, your awareness and your consciousness, that's all we have to interact with things.
That's right.
If you don't exercise it, you're not going to be very good at those things. We can all be better.
Right.
And I think we can are we really all comfortable with our own mind? I'm sure we all have times where we get uncomfortable with our mind and where we are.
Sure.
And I think we can maximize our comfort level if we exercise the mind and the mindfulness to have the most engaged existence with other people and with ourselves. I mean, these monks who go on retreats and they spend their time not talking and just internally reflecting for months, which sounds impossible for most of us.
I know.
Gives them one of the most engaged connections to themselves. So I don't know. I think it's as we talk, I'm learning so much, and I'm realizing that I should be practicing more.
Yeah. And people can. The thing is, you can do a lot of mini meditations during the day as part of your day. For example, when I wash my hands now during this epidemic, pandemic, I'm washing my hands a lot. I actually say a little gatha as I'm washing. Instead of 20 seconds singing happy birthday to myself, which is not going to do very much for me, I say a gatha. which has some meaning for me. So as I'm washing my hands, I can do a gatha. But there are many things you do during the day when you can do that. And also, by the way,
so when you do the gatha and you're washing your hands, you feel like it makes you more present in the hand washing moment.
I think it's Gartha, but he has a Boston accent.
Oh yeah,
Gatha. Did I say
Gartha?
Gatha. What was the other thing?
Yes,
I was
true.
going to say
Good
we
point.
shouldn't forget walking meditation because we all walk. But you can do there's many ways to do very, very good mindfulness training. Mindfulness breathing, or maybe focus just on the walking. However you want to do it, walking meditation is becoming very popular. And there are different ways to do it, but the principle is you're focusing on your walking, or you're focusing on your environment, but you're in the present moment. That's the thing. You're not in the future. You're not in the past. You're where you are. And where you focus may be different for different people. And so I just wanted to mention that too.
I'd love to touch on the second reason, or the first, depending on how you order them. I think it's the first reason on why mindfulness is cool. Because this ties into the fact that Sam Harris has a lesson on the Waking Up app called Don't Meditate Because It's Good for You. And the point of the lesson is it is super nice that it turns out that mindfulness and mindfulness meditation has all of these benefits, like, okay, it'll reduce your stress levels. It'll probably make your vitals healthier. You make your body healthier and your mind healthier. Okay. But there is this other way to approach it, which is this kind of like a scientific exploration of the mind from the first person, which is something that the Buddhists who created the mindfulness tradition, they are kind of, as far as I know, they're kind of the first to pioneer this subject of studying the mind from the first person, and that Western science has ignored for many years. Western science has been, and I'm a huge proponent of science, as you know. Western science is super interested in, obviously, how our minds are products of our brains, which has certain properties, and we can study them through neuroscience, psychology, all the way down to physics.
Quantum mechanics.
Yeah, all the way down to quarks and electrons. But what was my point? My point is that mindfulness allows you to study the mind from the first person.
Yeah,
so let's start the most basic philosophy, I think, therefore I am. The only evidence we have that anything exists is the fact that we're conscious. Consciousness is one of the biggest mysteries in all of science. It could be the biggest mystery because we basically have no idea, besides having good reason to think it's some kind of emergent property of the brain. We don't know how it emerges. The fact that it's, defining consciousness as the fact that it's like something to be you.
Right.
It feels like something to be us. We can suffer. We can have happy experiences. And there are facts about the mind that are either profound or obvious when you directly observe your mind through some of these mindfulness practices. I could give one example, which is the fact that the self is an illusion. You hear about this a lot in Buddhist practices, the illusory.
Dalai Lama loves this.
The illusory self. So it's like, what does that mean? They're not saying that you don't exist. It's an observation about your own mind, which is like I'm looking at this. Like in one of the guided meditations I do, he has us look at an object, and so I'm looking at a water bottle in front of me, and then the guide will say, look for yourself, look for what's looking. Is there a looker? What is the center? Is there a center of consciousness? And he'll say, do it. Don't spend a lot of time on this. Do it in the space of this finger snap. look for what's looking. What's looking? Where are you?
Right. Are you your eyes? Or where is...
And, what you can see in the first instant, and this can be a little frustrating because it can be confusing what he's asking, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I get through a lot of mindfulness practice, we'll cut all of this out.
Do you feel like you've gotten better at identifying? Is it trying?
Now I can instantly see that there is nothing looking. There is no looker. I can't look at myself.
And that's the point. So this is trying to de-identify.
It's like it took me months to realize the answer to the question.
You
practice.
Can't see the looker.
Yeah, there is no looker. I mean, there is just my experience the totality of experience, which includes my visual field with the water bottle in it. Mm-hmm. It includes all my sensations and my thoughts. Mm-hmm. But there is no unchanging self that is the personality of Jack. Yeah. That is an illusion. I mean,
that's one of the things when I know there were some things where the Dalai Lama has you look in a mirror and he talks about reflection, and he asks you to look in there, and you're looking in the mirror and you're thinking you see yourself, and it's like, what do you see? And you don't see yourself. That's not the self,
right?
It's light. It's
right.
I have to go back and look at it.
I mean, that's
these
basically
concepts
right.
of that. And this always brings me back to interconnectedness, and it's something I feel very strongly because I think about interconnectedness all the time.
Yeah.
In that, what defines where we end? We talked about extended phenotypes the other day.
Right.
Even our, all of these things. I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think that where do we end and where does the next thing start?
Right. I take a little issue with that, to be honest, because the truth is I don't think I can experience what you're experiencing directly. So there is some essential fact that we are not – of course we're connected in that we're in the same universe, but there's something about the fact that – I don't know, and I could be wrong about this. I feel like our minds are somewhat truly – alone
separate
in its experience. I mean, you think of the fact that you could
do
be.
You think magnetic fields? Do you think magnetic fields are truly alone?
Well, it's a good question, but we're talking about experience. I'm talking about conscious experience only.
Well, I guess that's one of the questions. Is
it's pretty clear that I can't mind read you to me.
That's clear
directly, or
right.
like if you get stabbed, I don't feel it, and.
But
there's something to the fact that where your mind is truly alone, and that if you take seriously the thought, the Matrix thought that this could be a simulation, it could be possible that you're only being simulated, and that me and Grandpa Harvey are figments of your your neurons are making you think you're seeing us.
You have full control.
So I don't think you can know for a fact that I am conscious.
That's true.
It would take a more developed theory of consciousness. This might be going off the rails a little bit.
When I talk about interconnectedness, I'm not talking about us being able to experience each other in the direct term of you feel what I feel, or what I'm thinking. When I talk about interconnectedness, I talk about how are the things that you do, how do they impact me? What is funny is, for instance, if someone shot you in the room right now, and there were two people in here, and one person didn't know you at all, and you're my son. I think I would have a series of emotions that are very different than the other person. Mm-hmm. So there are some types of connectedness that are wired into us somehow, but I'm not sure.
I'd like to be clear. I'm being very philosophical right now, but clearly we have very good reason to believe every human is conscious, and that possibly, and we're probably not in a simulation. and we want to be the best people we can to those around us, obviously. And mindfulness gives us a lot of tools to be better people. I wanted to say one last thing about the water bottle analogy.
I want to say one thing.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I want to say one thing, a couple of points I want to make. Because I think it's important, and because we're talking about the value of meditation. And as an older person, and I mentioned to you downstairs, and I think it's true. I mean, I feel a lot of the time I think I'm less so now, I'm better, but on autopilot much of the time.
Yeah.
Your life is on autopilot. You're just doing things rote. You're sort of we're buried in the future a lot. Some of us are more than others. I'm not saying everybody. But I find myself a lot in the past, certainly sometime in the future. So you can spend a lot of your time not really living, not actively living. You know what I mean? Not enjoying life necessarily. So if you can be more mindful and extend your mindfulness, when you think of it, you are extending your life. You may not have a special pill you can take that's doing that, or the fountain of youth, but it is some type of a fountain of extending, your life. Another point I just wanted to make that I think is so important that we have to remember, and Joseph Goldstein really stresses this point a lot, is that a thought is just a thought. It's just a blip. It's a blip. It's a blip of our experience. And you should not be a prisoner of those thoughts, because those thoughts are occurring now. Yes, they may have involved something that happened in the past, something in the future, but don't let the past and the future become a tremendous hindrance to you. Just think of it as a thought, and that's it, a blip. You just go on from there. And that can be very important. And if you do that, you can train yourself to accept it. And sometimes, because the mind is funny, and Joseph Goldstein mentioned this, and I do the same thing. If you find yourself at a dead end, where your thoughts just going on and on, the same thing over and over. I mean, you're at a dead end, you're not accomplishing anything more. You have to tell yourself you're at a dead end. You're at a dead end. Stop.
Right.
Stop. Just stop. And it has an effect. Just stopping. You know what I mean? Not going on and on.
But telling yourself to stop.
Telling yourself to stop. Yes. And Joseph Goldstein mentions the same thing. Sometimes you reach a point where you just have to say to yourself, no.
No more.
No more.
I think, and there's another trail of that, which is if you're having like one of these negative thoughts, like you're having road rage, or someone bumps into you on the sidewalk and they're like, whoa, man, watch where you're going. There is this fact that orthogonal to saying, just stop the bad feeling, sometimes the bad feeling is just there. And by observing it directly through mindfulness, which mindfulness is just, okay, let me really focus on what I'm experiencing right now. It will last shorter if you just focus on it.
Without judging it.
You just observe the feelings of anger without being identified with them. You almost like enter a dream where the thoughts just take over and you become the thoughts. But if you can see the thought as a thought, feel the feeling as just a feeling, as kind of a pattern of energy, it will last. It won't last as long. I think it lasts like exponentially shorter. And you very quickly become disinterested in whatever was happening. It's kind of like if you pay attention in some of these formal mindfulness sessions to what happens when a thought pops into your mind. When you look at the thought and pay attention to it, it's not that you discard it. It's not that you say, I'm going to let this thought go. It just goes. Like you can't help it. It just disappears.
Right.
Thoughts just come and go, and you're not in any control of it.
And you just allow it.
You allow it. And this, it ties into free will. We don't even have to get into that, but when
that's a whole nother
ultimately
podcast.
Our minds are just chaos and everything is just appearing and you have no choice whatsoever, like what thought pops into your head next and what person bumps into you next. And all your mind can do is observe and
Yeah.
And by observing, you become less reactionary, like we talked about before.
Absolutely. I'd like to mention one other thing I'd like to just
Bring up. Good.
bring up, and that is our meditation itself. I think it's helpful. It can be very helpful to have good guides to at least get you started, to teach you, you know what I mean, to give you some instruction, because there's
Sure.
no one way.
One way, right.
And I have studied, for example, one of the famous meditators is John Kabat-Zinn, very famous meditator who was head of the stress clinic at the University of Massachusetts, very famous in his work. But without going, some of these people have tapes, or have videos, or have books, and the videos or the tapes can be very, very helpful. And
Except no one has a cassette player anymore.
Oh, that's right. I shouldn't say that. That's right. So now you got
So they can use an MP3 player.
right MP3.
But,
right, exactly.
But I know what you mean.
yeah.
But you're talking about
but
guided versus unguided.
Guided to start with, anyway.
Right.
But I wanted to say is that I just want to give this example. I knew that meditation I've been very good with the informal meditation, trying to improve my mindfulness during the day with mindful breathing or other. It doesn't have to be with the breath. It could be in other ways too to become more mindful. But the meditation itself, I had a hard time with the formal meditation. Now, John Kabat-Zinn, for example, had a method which I liked, which was all right. He would actually spend a certain amount of time on the breath. And then he would go to sounds. He would use the sounds as the grounding tool. Then he would have you go to your thoughts. And then he may have you do something else. But basically, it was
Sequential,
and it was a routine. It didn't suit me. It was all right, but it didn't suit me.
You didn't connect with it.
And then I came across, by chance, I heard Joseph Goldstein was at a lecture, and he was lecturing to a group of meditators on his method of meditation. And he actually sat down and did a meditation with you. And I really liked it. I mean, it really made sense to me. And his basic method was, you don't have to be in order. Whatever presents itself in the moment, start there. If the sound's going on in the room, maybe someone's making noise in the other room. No matter what's going on, start where you want to start. It doesn't have to be in an orderly way.
Right.
And for me, I found that very, very helpful. I didn't have to start with the breath all the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? I could start with something else. I could start with a thought. I could start with something else.
And I felt like Zen Keys was like that for me because that's a very formal book on techniques of meditation, mostly focused on breathing. And so, even though I don't really practice, there was a period of time where like before I would take a shower, I would do 10 breaths and I would do these hand movements that I really felt like I was, bringing air in and then pushing air out. And it was like combinations of these movements plus almost like Tai Chi type stuff.
Right, exactly. Tai Chi is meditation, right.
But, I think having a guided method, I think for people who are interested in exercising their mindful,
you have to find a good source.
Yeah.
Because there are many bad teachers, just like there are bad teachers in any field.
Yeah,
there are gurus who are fake, who will pretend to put you on the path to enlightenment.
Like that,
like Kumare. Right? Like anyone could do that.
So good.
It's actually there, but there really are some really great teachers. And if you get one of these apps, like the 10% Happier one, or the Waking Up with Sam Harris. I should also say the Waking Up one is really nice because if you can't afford the subscription price, you can email his team and they'll just give it to you for free for the year indefinitely. And he says if your luck hasn't turned around after a year, you'll get it for free again indefinitely. Like he doesn't want money to get in the way of anyone wanting to meditate.
Yeah, I think the apps, by the way, is a very good way for people to get started.
It makes it easy. You can set notifications.
Because they not only teach you meditation, but there's usually a little some commentary beforehand. So they get you, and like Goldstein, what he does is when he's interviewed, he'll make some points, and then he'll go through with you a little meditation. And then at the end of that meditation, during the meditation, he will actually point out the things that he pointed out in the interview. And he'll bring it to life a little bit. And what he wants you to do, basically, is to carry what you learned in that meditation out into your day. He doesn't just see meditation as meditating for 10 minutes twice a day.
Right.
He sees it as taking some of the things you learn in that 10 minutes
and carry them through the rest of your day.
That's really the key.
They become the rest of your day.
Yeah.
And
it's this tool you can go back to when things happen as a management method.
That's right.
It's a little bit like the more flexible and fit you are, the more likely you will handle a fall well.
It's the same thing.
And so you can mentally fall during the day.
You will handle bad situations better.
Right. You can have a mental fall.
I think that's a wonderful analogy.
And if you're mentally fit, you're going to handle that fall better and not likely to break a mental bone.
I think that's terrific. I love that.
Just came up with that.
Yeah.
Podcast.
I love that. That's terrific.
And it's like Harvey mentioned about getting caught up in the past or the future. It gives you the ability to not get so caught up in like one regret that happened. You can view mistakes you've made in the past as like a thought that's appearing, and like why, like yes, mistakes should we should reflect on them, and if we really did something wrong, like obviously we can become better people because of it. But there's really no reason to excessively suffer over something that happened in the past.
Right.
I
think it teaches you to get a healthy sense of perspective.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's with all of these things that you're mentioning, it really is helping us with our own perspective of everything that happens to us. It's a healthy perspective.
Yeah. I want to say one other thing too. Having a grandson who's also interested in meditation really has been a tremendous thing for me. I have really enjoyed it. And I've learned a tremendous amount from Jack. And even
probably more the other way around too. Like,
well, there are certain
it's very helpful for me to have him to talk to.
Yeah, both. But
the student becomes the teacher. That's what happens.
Yes, and there are certain things that I hear from others, and I don't understand it completely.
He's like Kung Fu Panda.
And Jack has a way of just explaining them. He does. He's good. And it's been wonderful having a partner. You know what I mean? To share because it reinforces. We all need reinforcement.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's nutrition, exercise. As human, we all need reinforcement.
And I think our next podcast for the three of us is going to be plant-based nutrition.
Oh, boy. Wow.
So, and we have a certified Cornell graduate.
That's right.
From the plant-based nutrition program.
The truth is, I don't even think I should be there because I don't know enough about it.
Well, I
just know I feel good on it.
Right, and you experience it and you're living it, so you know how to shop and how to do things. And I think this was a really, really informative discussion.
It was.
And I think we hit a lot of topics.
Wow.
I don't know if you felt like we missed any major pieces.
I think we covered them.
It can go really go really deep on just one.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of technical things we missed about like facts you can learn about the mind.
Of course. But I think the idea is how do we get people interested in exercising the mind? And I think this was really good. We talked about some really interesting things, and I want to thank you both for coming to the Hurwitz Lab. You're all Hurwitzes, so this was really, truly the Hurwitz Lab in action.
I think this has been wonderful.
It was great.
Yeah.